The journey to Marcus's ship was unlike anything Zara had ever experienced. The human captain moved through the failing station with an economy of motion that spoke of countless similar rescues. He had rigged a portable gurney from salvaged materials, carefully securing her atmospheric dome while ensuring she could move safely through the station's increasingly unstable corridors. "Been doing this long?" Zara asked, her voice stronger now that she could breathe properly. The atmospheric processor hummed quietly beside her, its advanced technology maintaining perfect environmental conditions despite the chaos around them. Marcus navigated around a collapsed support beam, his movements careful but confident. "Rescue work? About 15 years now. Started after I left the Earth Defense Force." He paused to check his handheld scanner, frowning at whatever readings he was getting. "Though I have to admit, most of my pickups are stranded miners or transport crews. Research scientists are usually better at emergency planning." There was no judgment in his voice, just matter-of-fact observation. Zara felt heat rise in her scaled cheeks. "The data we were collecting, it was too important to abandon. 5 years of atmospheric readings that could change how we approach terraforming. I thought I had more time." "Science types always think they have more time," Marcus replied, but his tone was understanding rather than critical. "I've pulled more than one researcher out of dangerous situations because they were convinced their work was worth dying for." They reached the docking tube connecting the research station to Marcus's ship, the Wanderer. The older vessel's airlock had been modified with additional sealing mechanisms, and Zara could see why when they passed through. The ship's interior was a fascinating blend of cutting-edge life support technology and obviously second-hand everything else. The corridors were narrow but efficiently laid out, with every surface serving multiple purposes. What caught Zara's attention immediately was the diversity of atmospheric controls throughout the ship. She could see regulators for methane-breathing species, nitrogen preference indicators, and even what looked like a sulfur compound processing unit. "You carry a lot of different passengers," she observed, as Marcus guided her gurney toward what was obviously a medical bay. "The Wanderer's designed for multi-species transport," he explained, beginning to transfer her atmospheric dome to a more permanent life support station. "Most commercial vessels stick to human-compatible atmospheres and let other species deal with breathing apparatus. I figured there was good money in being able to carry anyone anywhere safely." The medical bay was surprisingly sophisticated. The equipment was clearly second-hand, but it had been maintained with obsessive care. More importantly, it had been modified to handle the medical needs of at least a dozen different known species. Zara recognized monitoring equipment designed for her own people alongside. Devices she knew were used by the silicon-based crystallines and the high-pressure environment depth. "Dwellers! This equipment costs more than—" "Most small ships," Zara said, unable to hide her amazement. "How does an independent freight captain afford medical gear designed for multi-species emergencies?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, his hands steady as he adjusted her life support settings. "Turns out there's a lot of people in the galaxy who need help, and not all of them can pay for it up front. But some of them remember favors, and some of them happen to be very good at acquiring hard-to-find equipment." It was a non-answer that told Zara everything she needed to know. Marcus Chen wasn't just running a freight business. He was running an unofficial rescue and transport service for anyone who needed it, regardless of species or ability to pay. The sophisticated equipment around her represented favors earned and debts willingly taken on. "The atmospheric readings you mentioned," Marcus said, settling into a chair beside her treatment bed. "What makes them so important?" Zara's eyes lit up despite her exhaustion. "We've been studying how different atmospheric compositions affect planetary climate stability. Most terraforming efforts focus on creating Earth-like conditions, but that's not optimal for every world. We've discovered that some planets actually achieve better long-term stability with what humans would consider hostile atmospheres." She gestured weakly toward the data cores that Marcus had insisted on bringing aboard. "Those cores contain atmospheric models for over 200 different worlds. With that data, we could terraform planets that were previously considered impossible to settle, and do it in ways that work with the planet's natural systems instead of against them." Marcus leaned forward, genuinely interested. "Planets that could support multiple species?" "Exactly. Instead of creating worlds that only one species can inhabit, we could design atmospheric layers that support several different kinds of life simultaneously. Imagine cities where Aquarians like me could work alongside humans, while methane breathers lived in the upper atmospheric layers and crystal people thrived in the mineral-rich lower regions. That would change everything, Marcus said quietly. No more competition for habitable worlds. No more choosing between species when planning new colonies. It would also put a lot of terraforming companies out of business, Zara added with a bitter laugh. The current system is profitable because it's exclusive. Each world gets designed for one species, one culture, one economic system. What we're proposing would require cooperation and shared resources. The ship's intercom crackled to life, interrupting their conversation. Captain, we've got company incoming. 3 ships moving fast from the direction of the Jupiter mining stations. Marcus was on his feet immediately, his relaxed demeanor replaced by sharp alertness. What configuration? Military grade, but no identification signals. They're jamming communications and moving to intercept. Zara felt her blood chill. Corporate security? Marcus was already moving toward the bridge, his jaw set in a grim line. Probably. Seems your research data is worth more than just scientific recognition. Through the medical bay's small viewport, Zara could see 3 sleek vessels emerging from Titan's methane clouds. They moved with the predatory grace of military ships, but their hulls bore no official markings. Corporate mercenaries, the kind hired to protect industrial interests regardless of law or ethics. They can't just attack us, Zara protested, even as she said it knowing how naive she sounded. They can if there are no witnesses, Marcus replied grimly. And if they're here, it means someone with serious money decided your research data is too dangerous to be made public. The lead pursuit ship was closing rapidly, its weapon systems powering up with a low, ominous hum that carried through the Wanderer's hull. Zara realized with growing horror that her rescue might have just turned into something far more dangerous. Can you outrun them? She asked. Marcus's smile was sharp and predatory. In this old bucket? Not a chance. He paused at the medical bay's door, looking back at her with eyes that had gone cold and calculating. But outrunning isn't the only option. The journey to Marcus's ship was unlike anything Zara had ever experienced. The human captain moved through the failing station with an economy of motion that spoke of countless similar rescues. He had rigged a portable gurney from salvaged materials, carefully securing her atmospheric dome while ensuring she could move safely through the station's increasingly unstable corridors. Been doing this long? Zara asked, her voice stronger now that she could breathe properly. The atmospheric processor hummed quietly beside her, its advanced technology maintaining perfect environmental conditions despite the chaos around them. Marcus navigated around a collapsed support beam, his movements careful but confident. Rescue work? About 15 years now. Started after I left the Earth Defense Force. He paused to check his handheld scanner, frowning at whatever readings he was getting. Though I have to admit most of my pickups are stranded miners or transport crews. Research scientists are usually better at emergency planning. There was no judgment in his voice, just matter-of-fact observation. Zara felt heat rise in her scaled cheeks. The data we were collecting, it was too important to abandon. 5 years of atmospheric readings that could change how we approach terraforming. I thought I had more time. Science types always think they have more time, Marcus replied, but his tone was understanding rather than critical. I've pulled more than one researcher out of dangerous situations because they were convinced their work was worth dying for. They reached the docking tube connecting the research station to Marcus's ship, the Wanderer. The older vessel's airlock had been modified with additional sealing mechanisms, and Zara could see why when they passed through. The ship's interior was a fascinating blend of cutting-edge life support technology and obviously second-hand everything else. The corridors were narrow but efficiently laid out, with every surface serving multiple purposes. What caught Zara's attention immediately was the diversity of atmospheric controls throughout the ship. She could see regulators for methane-breathing species, nitrogen preference indicators, and even what looked like a sulfur compound processing unit. You carry a lot of different passengers, she observed, as Marcus guided her gurney toward what was obviously a medical bay. The Wanderer's designed for multi-species transport, he explained, beginning to transfer her atmospheric dome to a more permanent life support station. Most commercial vessels stick to human-compatible atmospheres and let other species deal with breathing apparatus. I figured there was good money in being able to carry anyone, anywhere, safely. The medical bay was surprisingly sophisticated. The equipment was clearly second-hand, but it had been maintained with obsessive care. More importantly, it had been modified to handle the medical needs of at least a dozen different known species. Zara recognized monitoring equipment designed for her own people alongside devices she knew were used by the silicon-based crystallines in the high-pressure environment depth. Dwellers, this equipment costs more than most small ships, Zara said, unable to hide her amazement. How does an independent freight captain afford medical gear designed for multi-species emergencies? Marcus was quiet for a moment, his hand steady as he adjusted her life support settings. Turns out there's a lot of people in the galaxy who need help, and not all of them can pay for it up front. But some of them remember favors, and some of them happen to be very good at acquiring hard-to-find equipment. It was a non-answer that told Zara everything she needed to know. Marcus Chen wasn't just running a freight business. He was running an unofficial rescue and transport service for anyone who needed it, regardless of species or ability to pay. The sophisticated equipment around her represented favors earned and debts willingly taken on. The atmospheric readings you mentioned, Marcus said, settling into a chair beside her treatment bed. What makes them so important? Zara's eyes lit up despite her exhaustion. We've been studying how different atmospheric compositions affect planetary climate stability. Most terraforming efforts focus on creating Earth-like conditions, but that's not optimal for every world. We've discovered that some planets actually achieve better long-term stability with what humans would consider hostile atmospheres. She gestured weakly toward the data cores that Marcus had insisted on bringing aboard. Those cores contain atmospheric models for over 200 different worlds. With that data, we could terraform planets that were previously considered impossible to settle, and do it in ways that work with the planet's natural systems instead of against them. Marcus leaned forward, genuinely interested. Planets that could support multiple species? Exactly. Instead of creating worlds that only one species can inhabit, we could design atmospheric layers that support several different kinds of life simultaneously. Imagine cities where Aquarians like me could work alongside humans, while methane breathers lived in the upper atmospheric layers, and crystal people thrived in the mineral-rich lower regions. That would change everything, Marcus said quietly. No more competition for habitable worlds. No more choosing between species when planning new colonies. It would also put a lot of terraforming companies out of business. Zara added with a bitter laugh. The current system is profitable because it's exclusive. Each world gets designed for one species, one culture, one economic system. What we're proposing would require cooperation and shared resources. The ship's intercom crackled to life, interrupting their conversation. Captain, we've got company incoming. 3 ships moving fast from the direction of the Jupiter mining stations. Marcus was on his feet immediately, his relaxed demeanor replaced by sharp alertness. What configuration? Military grade, but no identification signals. They're jamming communications and moving to intercept. Zara felt her blood chill. Corporate security? Marcus was already moving toward the bridge, his jaw set in a grim line. Probably. Seems your research data is worth more than just scientific recognition. Through the medical bay's small viewport, Zara could see 3 sleek vessels emerging from Titan's methane clouds. They moved with the predatory grace of military ships, but their hulls bore no official markings. Corporate mercenaries, the kind hired to protect industrial interests regardless of law or ethics. They can't just attack us, Zara protested, even as she said it knowing how naive she sounded. They can if there are no witnesses, Marcus replied grimly. And if they're here, it means someone with serious money decided your research data is too dangerous to be made public. The lead pursuit ship was closing rapidly, its weapon systems powering up with a low, ominous hum that carried through the Wanderer's hull. Zara realized with growing horror that her rescue might have just turned into something far more dangerous. Can you outrun them? She asked. Marcus's smile was sharp and predatory. In this old bucket? Not a chance. He paused at the medical bay's door, looking back at her with eyes that had gone cold and calculating. But outrunning isn't the only option. The bridge of the Wanderer was cramped but efficient, every surface covered with displays and controls that Marcus operated with practiced ease. Zara had insisted on being brought up from the medical bay, her portable atmospheric unit allowing her to move around the ship despite her weakened condition. She needed to see what was happening. 3 heavy interceptors, reported the ship's AI in a crisp, neutral voice. Weapons hot, jamming all communication frequencies. Estimated time to weapons range, 4 minutes. Marcus's fingers danced across the control panels, bringing up tactical displays and system readouts. Vex, I need you to patch into the local traffic control network. Find me everything you can about those ships. Already on it, Captain, the AI responded. The name Vex was unusual for a ship's computer, and Zara noticed that Marcus spoke to it more like a crew member than a machine. Ships are registered to Meridian Industrial Solutions as mining survey vessels, but their energy signatures match military-grade corvettes. No legal authority for interdiction in this sector. Meridian, Zara breathed, recognizing the name. They're one of the largest terraforming corporations in human space. If they're here, then your research threatens their business model, Marcus finished grimly. He was pulling up navigation charts, his eyes scanning for options. They can't let multi-species terraforming technology reach the public. Too much money at stake. The lead corporate ship opened communications, its signal cutting through their jamming with ease. The face that appeared on the main screen was coldly professional, a human woman in corporate uniform, her expression completely devoid of emotion. Independent vessel wanderer. You are carrying stolen corporate property. Heave to immediately and prepare to be boarded. Marcus laughed, a sound completely without humor. Stolen property? That's creative. The research was conducted under independent scientific charter. Dr. Keth's research was funded through grants provided by Meridian subsidiaries, the corporate officer replied smoothly. All data belongs to the funding organization. You have 60 seconds to comply. Zara felt sick. She had known about the funding connections, but her research charter specifically guaranteed scientific independence. Apparently, corporate lawyers had found loopholes that made such guarantees meaningless. Options? Marcus asked Vex quietly. Limited. The interceptors are faster and better armed. However, Titan's atmospheric interference provides some tactical opportunities. The methane storms create sensor shadows and communication dead zones. Marcus was studying the navigation display intently, his weathered fingers tracing possible routes through the swirling atmospheric data. What about the old mining complex at Kraken Mare? Abandoned 3 years ago due to atmospheric instability. Multiple levels, significant metallic interference with scanning equipment, would provide excellent cover, but the atmospheric composition in that region is highly unstable, toxic even to most breathing apparatus. The complex was abandoned because the mining operations destabilized underground methane deposits. Zara looked up sharply. What kind of atmospheric instability? Vex displayed the relevant data on her portable screen. Methane concentrations approaching 90%, with significant hydrogen sulfide contamination. Toxic to most known species, including humans. Even environmental suits would be compromised after extended exposure. Most known species, Zara repeated thoughtfully, studying the readings. But not all. Marcus caught her meaning immediately. You could survive in that atmosphere? Aquarians evolved in methane-rich environments before we developed oxygen-breathing capabilities, she explained, her mind racing through the possibilities. I could survive in that complex for days without life support. Maybe longer. The corporate ships were closing rapidly, their weapon systems charging for firing. Marcus made his decision with the split-second timing that had kept him alive through 15 years of dangerous rescues. Vex. Set course for Kraken Mare. Full acceleration, and dump our heat signature into the engine wake. Course laid in. Warning. Entering the Kraken Mare complex will expose the ship to significant atmospheric corrosion. Better than being blown apart by corporate killers, Marcus replied tersely. The Wanderer dove toward Titan's surface, using the moon's gravity well to build speed while simultaneously diving into the thickest part of the atmospheric storms. The corporate ships followed, but their pursuit became more cautious as the atmospheric interference increased. They're falling back, Zara observed. Watching the tactical display, they know something we don't, Marcus said grimly. Corporate types don't give up easily when there's this much money involved. The abandoned mining complex appeared through the methane haze like a metallic cancer on Titan's surface. Massive extraction towers rose from the frozen hydrocarbon lakes, connected by a web of tunnels and processing facilities that stretched for kilometers underground. The whole complex was dark, powered down and slowly being reclaimed by Titan's hostile environment. Marcus brought the Wanderer in low, using the extraction towers as cover while looking for a place to land. The ship's hull groaned under the increasing atmospheric pressure, and Zara could hear warning alarms beginning to sound as the corrosive methane began to eat at their external systems. There, she pointed to a landing platform between two of the larger processing towers. That platform has enclosed docking facilities. We can seal the ship and use the complex's tunnel system to move the data cores. And then what? Marcus asked, bringing the ship down with practiced skill despite the deteriorating visibility. We can't stay here forever. I've been thinking about that, Zara said, her scientific mind working through the tactical problem. The corporate ships can't follow us into the complex. The atmospheric contamination would destroy their systems. But they can wait for us to come out. So we're trapped. Maybe not. Zara pulled up the complex's structural data on her portable unit. These mining operations went deep, all the way down to Titan's bedrock. There are natural cave systems down there, some of them connecting to other parts of the moon's surface. If we can get the data cores deep enough, Marcus was beginning to understand. We could exit somewhere else entirely. Exactly. But it would mean carrying the data cores through kilometers of tunnels filled with atmosphere that would kill you in minutes. The ship settled onto the landing platform with a heavy thud, the landing gear adjusting automatically to the uneven surface. Through the viewport, they could see the entrance to the complex's tunnel system, dark and uninviting but offering their only hope of escape. I'd have to go alone, Zara continued. You couldn't survive the journey even with environmental gear. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his hands still on the ship's controls. There's got to be another way. There isn't, Zara said firmly. Those data cores contain information that could revolutionize how we approach interspecies cooperation. Hundreds of worlds could be open to settlement, supporting multiple species simultaneously. That's worth the risk. Not if it gets you killed. The intensity in his voice surprised her. They had known each other for less than a day, but there was genuine concern in his expression that went beyond professional obligation. Why? She asked quietly. Why does it matter so much to you? Marcus looked out at the toxic alien landscape surrounding them. Because I've spent 15 years watching species compete for resources instead of cooperating. I've seen wars fought over habitable worlds, seen entire peoples displaced because they couldn't adapt to human standard atmospheres. He turned to meet her eyes. If there's a chance to change that, it's worth fighting for. The corporate ships were circling overhead waiting for them to emerge. Time was running out and they both knew it. The tunnel system beneath the Krakenmare complex was a labyrinth of corroded metal and crystallized methane deposits. Zara moved through the toxic atmosphere with growing confidence, her modified respiratory system actually functioning better in the methane-rich environment than it had in the failing life support of the research station. Marcus had insisted on coming, as far as his environmental suit would allow, helping her carry the data cores to the first atmospheric checkpoint. They had rigged a communication system using the complex's old mining network, allowing them to stay in contact despite the distance and interference. Environmental readings are holding stable. Marcus's voice crackled through the comm system. How are you feeling? Better than I have in days, Zara replied honestly. The methane atmosphere was like a homecoming for her species' ancient evolutionary adaptations. It's like breathing pure mountain air for humans. She was making good time through the tunnel system, following pre-war mining maps that Vex had downloaded from the complex's abandoned databases. The data cores were heavy but manageable, and she had rigged a crude sled from mining equipment to help transport them. Zara. Marcus's voice carried a note of concern. I'm reading seismic activity on the surface sensors. The corporate ships are using mining charges to collapse tunnel entrances. She paused, checking her own readings. They're trying to trap us in here. Looks like it. They can't come in after you, so they're making sure you can't get out. The implications were chilling. The corporate forces were willing to commit murder to protect their industrial secrets, and they had the resources to make it look like an accident. A mining complex collapse in an unstable atmospheric environment would be easy to explain away. Marcus, she said carefully, you need to get back to your ship. If they're collapsing tunnels, you're in danger too. Not happening. We're in this together. Be practical. Your ship can escape. You can get word out about what happened here. Maybe prevent Meridian from covering this up completely. There was a long pause before Marcus responded. There might be another option. Zara had reached a major junction in the tunnel system, where several mining shafts converged around a central processing area. The atmospheric readings here were even more favorable, nearly pure methane with trace hydrocarbons that her species found energizing. "What kind of option?" she asked, setting down the data cores to rest. "I've been going through the complex's old operational files with Vex. This place wasn't just a mining operation, it was a prototype atmospheric processing facility. Meridian was testing large-scale atmospheric modification here before the project was abandoned." Atmospheric modification? Zara's scientific interest was immediately piqued. What kind of modifications? They were trying to create stable atmospheric layers, different gas compositions at different altitudes that could support various industrial processes. The project failed because they couldn't maintain the boundary layers, but the equipment is still here. Zara was beginning to understand. If we could reactivate the atmospheric processors, we could create an environment that's survivable for multiple species. At least temporarily. It was a long shot, but it might work. The old atmospheric processors were massive industrial units designed to create and maintain specific gas mixtures across large areas. If they could get them running again, they might be able to create safe passage for Marcus while maintaining the toxic conditions that protected them from corporate pursuit. "How long would it take to bring the processors online?" she asked. "According to Vex, about 6 hours if everything works perfectly. Longer if we run into complications." 6 hours was a long time when corporate forces were actively trying to kill them, but it might be their only chance. Zara made her decision. "Send me the technical specifications. I'm going to continue toward the main processing center while you work on the startup sequences from your end." "Zara, wait. There's something else you should know." The tone of his voice made her pause. "What?" "The atmospheric processors don't just create gas mixtures. They're designed to extract and concentrate atmospheric components. If Meridian built what I think they built, those processors could be used to create pure oxygen environments anywhere on Titan." The implications hit her immediately. They weren't just testing atmospheric modification for industrial purposes. They were developing weapons, Marcus confirmed grimly. Atmospheric weapons that could make entire planets uninhabitable for specific species, while leaving others unaffected. The scope of what they had discovered was staggering. Meridian wasn't just protecting terraforming profits. They were protecting a weapons development program that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. The ability to selectively target species through atmospheric manipulation would make conventional military force obsolete. That's why they're so desperate to stop us, Zara realized. The terraforming data is valuable, but this weapons technology is worth killing for. And dying for, Marcus added quietly. If this technology reaches the wrong hands, it could trigger interspecies warfare on a scale we've never seen. Zara looked at the data cores containing 5 years of atmospheric research, suddenly understanding their true value. In the right hands, the information could revolutionize peaceful cooperation between species. In the wrong hands, it could be used to commit genocide on a planetary scale. "We have to destroy it," she said quietly. "What?" "The atmospheric processor technology. We can't let it fall into anyone's hands. The risk is too great." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "That means destroying the terraforming data too." "Everything you've worked for." "Not everything." Zara was thinking fast, her scientific mind working through the possibilities. "I can recreate most of the terraforming research from memory and basic atmospheric readings. But the weapons applications require the specific technical details that are stored in these cores." Another seismic tremor shook the tunnel complex, stronger this time. Dust and methane crystals rained down from the ceiling as support structures groaned under the stress. "They're accelerating the timeline," Marcus observed. "Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it fast." Zara gathered up the data cores and continued toward the main processing center, her mind racing through the technical challenges ahead. They would need to reactivate the atmospheric processors, create a safe environment for Marcus to join her, and then find a way to destroy the weapons technology while preserving the beneficial terraforming data. It seemed impossible, but as she moved through the alien environment that felt more like home than any human space station, she began to believe it might actually work. The key was understanding that sometimes the greatest victories required the greatest sacrifices. And sometimes those sacrifices brought people together in ways that changed everything. The main processing center was a cathedral of industrial engineering. its soaring spaces filled with massive atmospheric processors that had been designed to reshape entire planetary atmospheres. Zara stood before the central control console, her scaled hands moving across interfaces that had been dark for 3 years. System status? Marcus's voice echoed through the comm system as she began the startup sequence. Better than expected, she replied, watching as diagnostic displays came online one by one. Meridian built these processors to last. Most systems are in standby mode rather than fully offline. The atmospheric processors were marvels of engineering, each one the size of a small building and capable of processing millions of cubic meters of gas per hour. They had been designed to create precise atmospheric gradients, allowing different environmental conditions to exist in stable layers within the same space. I'm seeing the technical specifications now, Zara continued, her voice filled with scientific appreciation, despite their desperate situation. These aren't just atmospheric processors, they're atmospheric architects. They can create and maintain incredibly complex gas mixtures with surgical precision. Which explains why Meridian was so interested in weaponizing them, Marcus replied grimly. Zara was working her way through the startup checklist, bringing primary systems online while simultaneously studying the technical documentation. What she found there made her stomach turn. Marcus, this is worse than we thought. The weapons applications aren't theoretical. They're already developed. These processors were used to test atmospheric weapons on uninhabited worlds. What kind of tests? Selective atmospheric poisoning, oxygen displacement, pressure differential weapons. Zara's voice trailed off as she read through test reports that detailed the systematic destruction of entire ecosystems. They tested these on worlds with indigenous life forms. The implications were staggering. Meridian hadn't just developed atmospheric weapons, they had field-tested them, wiping out alien ecosystems to gather data on their effectiveness. The corporate pursuit of them wasn't just about protecting profits or trade secrets. It was about covering up war crimes. How long until the processors are fully online? Marcus asked. 20 minutes for basic atmospheric modification. Another hour for full precision control. Zara paused in her work, staring at the technical readouts. But Marcus, I'm not sure we should activate them at all. Why not? Because the moment these processors come online, they'll send a signal to Meridian's corporate network. Automated status reports, system diagnostics, operational data. Even if we destroy the data cores, they'll know we've been here and what we've seen. The silence on the comm stretched long enough that Zara began to worry they had lost contact. Then Marcus's voice came back, thoughtful and determined. What if that's exactly what we want? I don't understand. Think about it. Right now, this is a corporate black operation. They can deny everything, claim we're terrorists or thieves, make us disappear without anyone asking questions. But if we force them to activate their illegal weapons program in front of witnesses, Zara was beginning to understand. We turn their cover-up into exposure. Exactly. Vex, are you monitoring this conversation? Affirmative, Captain. I am also monitoring 17 different news networks, 4 government communication channels, and the emergency frequencies of 6 different species military forces. Good. When those processors come online, I want you to broadcast everything. System specifications, test data, operational parameters. Send it everywhere to everyone. That will certainly draw attention, Vex observed with what sounded almost like amusement. Another seismic tremor shook the processing center, this one strong enough to knock Zara off her feet. Warning lights began flashing across the control panels as structural integrity alarms sounded throughout the complex. They're getting more aggressive with the charges, she said, pulling herself back to the controls. How much time do we have? According to my structural analysis, the complex will suffer critical failure within 2 hours, Vex reported. However, the corporate forces appear to be targeting specific support structures. They may be planning a controlled collapse rather than total destruction. They want to bury us but preserve the equipment, Marcus realized. They're planning to come back for the processors after we're dead. Zara made her decision. Her fingers flew across the control interfaces, activating startup sequences for all 6 atmospheric processors simultaneously. Then we don't give them the chance. The processors began to hum with increasing power, their massive intake valves opening to sample the complex's toxic atmosphere. Within minutes, they would begin the process of creating new atmospheric gradients throughout the facility. Zara, what are you doing? Creating a message they can't ignore. she replied, programming the processors with atmospheric specifications she was designing on the fly. These processors are going to create the most visible atmospheric modification in Titan's recorded history. She was designing an atmospheric sculpture, layers of different gases that would create visible patterns when viewed from orbit. The atmospheric processors would shape Titan's local atmosphere into a message that could be seen from space, readable to any ship with basic atmospheric sensors. A message saying what? That atmospheric weapons exist, that they've been tested, and that the technology is here for anyone to find. Zara's hands moved with increasing urgency as the processors came fully online. By the time we're done, every major news network in human space will be sending ships to investigate. The first processor reached full operational status and immediately began reshaping the atmosphere around them. Zara felt the change as a subtle shift in pressure and gas mixture, still perfectly breathable for her, but now containing trace elements that would show up clearly on orbital scans. Corporate ships are moving, Marcus reported. They're accelerating their timeline. Good. Let them panic. Zara activated the second processor, adding another layer to her atmospheric message. The more desperate they get, the more mistakes they'll make. The third and fourth processors came online in quick succession, and suddenly the atmosphere around them began to take on an almost crystalline quality. As different gas densities created visible distortions in the air, Zara had turned the complex into a massive beacon, broadcasting their location and message to anyone with eyes to see. I'm reading massive atmospheric disturbances on the surface, Marcus said, his voice filled with amazement. Zara, you've created a storm system visible from the outer planets. That's the idea. She activated the fifth processor, feeling a fierce satisfaction as the atmospheric sculpture took final shape. Now comes the hard part, which is staying alive long enough for help to arrive. Zara looked at the data cores containing the weapons research, then at the control systems for the processors, and making sure the right people get the right information. The corporate forces had stopped using seismic charges, probably realizing that their targets were now too valuable to risk destroying. But that meant they would be coming in person, environmental suits and all, to try to stop what Zara and Marcus had started. The real fight was just beginning. The corporate assault team moved through the tunnel system with military precision, their environmental suits glowing softly in the methane-rich darkness. Zara watched them approach on the security monitors, counting at least 12 heavily armed figures making their way toward the processing center. They're professionals, Marcus observed over the comm. His voice carried the tension of someone who had seen combat before. Military contractors, not corporate security. How long until you can reach the processing center? Zara asked, her hands busy at the control panels as she made final adjustments to the atmospheric processors. 20 minutes through the safe corridors, but that puts me here after they arrive. 10 minutes if I take the direct route through the high contamination zones. The contamination will kill you, maybe, but these new atmospheric gradients you've created might provide some protection. The processors are creating microenvironments with different gas concentrations. Zara studied the atmospheric readings, her scientific mind working through the possibilities. The processors had indeed created a complex layered environment, with pockets of less toxic atmosphere scattered throughout the complex. It was possible, barely, that Marcus could navigate between these safe zones if he timed it perfectly. It's too dangerous, she said firmly. I can handle the assault team. With what? You're a scientist, not a soldier. I'm a scientist who knows more about atmospheric manipulation than anyone else in this complex, Zara corrected. And I have 6 of the most sophisticated atmospheric processors ever built at my disposal. She was already reprogramming the processors, shifting from her orbital message pattern to something more immediately tactical. The massive machines responded to her commands, beginning to create localized atmospheric conditions that would be manageable for her, but potentially lethal for humans in environmental suits. Zara, what are you planning? Environmental warfare. Her scaled fingers danced across the controls, creating pockets of high-pressure methane that would overwhelm most breathing apparatus. They want to use atmospheric weapons? Let them see how it feels to be on the receiving end. The first corporate soldiers reached the outer chambers of the processing center, their suit lights cutting through the swirling gases that Zara was manipulating around them. She watched them on the monitors, timing her atmospheric shifts to create maximum confusion and disorientation. Warning shots fired, she reported as energy weapons discharged in the outer corridors. They're shooting at atmospheric distortions thinking they're seeing movement. Because they are seeing movement, Marcus realized. You're using the gas densities to create optical illusions. Basic atmospheric physics. Different gas densities bend light differently. I'm essentially turning the entire complex into a hall of mirrors. The assault team was advancing more cautiously now, their formation tighter, as they tried to maintain visual contact with each other through the shifting atmospheric conditions. Zara continued to manipulate the environment around them, creating false passages and dead ends by manipulating gas density walls. They're adapting, she observed with professional interest, using sonar mapping instead of visual navigation. Can you counter that? Already working on it. Zara adjusted the processor output, creating acoustic shadows and sound reflection patterns that would confuse sonar readings. But it's only buying time. Eventually they'll reach the central chamber. That was when Marcus's voice cut through the comm with urgent intensity. Zara, I'm reading new ships entering Titan's atmosphere. 3 vessels moving fast. More corporate reinforcements? Negative. I'm reading Earth Defense Force transponder codes and... Marcus paused, checking his readings. And Aquarian Republic identifiers. And crystalline Federation signals. Zara felt a surge of hope. The message worked. The atmospheric disturbance brought in official investigators. It's about to get very complicated in here, Marcus warned. Multiple governments, multiple species, all converging on a location where corporate forces are attempting to assassinate scientists. The assault team had reached the main processing chamber, their weapons trained on Zara. As she stood beside the central control console, she could see their faces through their helmet visors. Cold, professional, utterly determined. Dr. Keth, the team leader, spoke through external speakers, his voice mechanically filtered. Step away from the controls. You're interfering with a lawful corporate operation. Lawful? Zara laughed, the sound echoing strangely through the complex atmospheric layers. You're covering up war crimes. You're in possession of stolen corporate property. Return the data cores and surrender for processing. Processing? The euphemism was chilling. You mean execution? The team leader raised his weapon and Zara made her final gambit. Her hand slammed down on the emergency activation switch, bringing all 6 atmospheric processors to maximum output simultaneously. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The entire complex filled with swirling clouds of different gases, each processor creating a distinct atmospheric environment that overlapped and interacted with the others. Pressure differentials created howling winds that knocked the assault team off their feet. Gas density shifts made solid objects appear to float or disappear entirely. And in the center of it all, Zara stood untouched, her physiology allowing her to breathe easily in conditions that would kill most other species in minutes. Impossible, the team leader gasped through his suit's emergency filters. Atmospheric. Manipulation 101, Zara replied calmly. Never start a gas fight with someone who doesn't need to breathe your air. The assault team's environmental suits were failing rapidly, their filtration systems overwhelmed by the complex gas mixtures. One by one they began to retreat, their mission abandoned in favor of basic survival. Zara, Marcus's voice carried excitement and relief in equal measure. The government ships are demanding immediate surrender from the corporate forces. They're citing interspecies treaty violations and demanding access to the complex. How long until they arrive? 10 minutes, and Zara? One of the Aquarian ships is requesting direct communication with you. She looked at the data cores containing the weapons research, then at the atmospheric processors that had just demonstrated their terrifying potential. In the right hands, this technology could protect entire worlds. In the wrong hands, it could destroy them. Patch them through, she said, beginning to shut down the processor's emergency output. It's time to tell the galaxy what Meridian Industries has been hiding. As the artificial atmospheric storm began to calm, Zara realized that she was breathing freely for the first time in days. Not just because the air was right for her physiology, but because the truth was finally going to be told. The corporate soldiers had retreated, the weapons research would be exposed, and the galaxy would have to decide what to do with technology that could save worlds or destroy them. Most importantly, she was alive to see it happen, thanks to a human freight captain who had risked everything to help a stranger breathe again. 6 months later, Zara stood on the observation deck of the new Titan research station, watching as the first multi-species colony ship approached through the moon's atmosphere. The massive vessel carried settlers from 7 different species, all bound for New Harmony, the first world to be terraformed using her atmospheric layering technology. Second thoughts? Marcus asked, joining her at the viewport. He wore the uniform of the newly formed Interspecies Atmospheric Research Council, the organization that had been created to oversee the ethical development of atmospheric modification technology. About which part? Zara replied with a smile. Exposing corporate war crimes, revolutionizing terraforming science, or working with a stubborn human who refuses to take credit for saving the galaxy? I was thinking more about the part where you agreed to let me tag along on every research expedition for the next 5 years. Their partnership had surprised everyone, including themselves. The freight captain and the atmospheric scientist had proven to be an effective team, combining practical experience with theoretical knowledge in ways that neither could have achieved alone. Someone has to keep you out of trouble, Zara said, her tone affectionate. Besides, you're the only human I know who carries atmospheric processors as standard cargo. The Wanderer had been extensively modified after the Titan incident, transformed from a simple freight hauler into a mobile atmospheric research laboratory. It was equipped with the most advanced life support systems in known space, capable of sustaining any known species for extended periods. Any word from the Meridian trials? Marcus asked. Guilty verdicts on all charges, Zara reported with satisfaction. War crimes, illegal weapons development, corporate assassination attempts. The executives are looking at life sentences, and the company is being dissolved. The corporate forces that had tried to kill them on Titan had been captured by the arriving government ships, their environmental suits failing just as rescue arrived. The evidence they carried had been devastating. Detailed records of atmospheric weapons tests, assassination orders, and a complete database of illegal research operations. What about the atmospheric processors on Titan? Converted into a memorial and research station, Zara said, gesturing toward the displays showing the new facility. The same technology that was designed to destroy worlds is now being used to create homes for multiple species. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. The weapons research that Meridian had tried to protect was now public knowledge, but under strict international oversight. The atmospheric processors were being used to create unprecedented cooperation between species, rather than weapons to destroy them. I've been thinking about your original research, Marcus said, pulling up a data pad with atmospheric readings from New Harmony. The multi-species terraforming project. It's working even better than you predicted. Zara looked at the readings with professional pride. New Harmony's atmosphere was a masterpiece of engineering. 7 distinct atmospheric layers that supported different species while maintaining overall planetary stability. Humans lived in the moderate middle altitudes, while Aquarians like herself thrived in the humid lower regions. Crystalline species had established communities in the mineral-rich deep caverns, while methane-breathing species occupied the upper atmospheric platforms. The key was understanding that cooperation produces better results than competition, she said. When species work together instead of fighting for resources, everyone benefits. Speaking of cooperation, Marcus said with a grin, I have something for you. He handed her an official-looking document bearing the seals of 12 different planetary governments. Zara scanned the contents, her eyes widening as she realized what she was reading. A formal offer of citizenship from the United Earth government, she said incredulously. But I'm already an Aquarian citizen. Dual citizenship, Marcus explained. The first one ever granted to a non-human. It comes with a few perks: diplomatic immunity, access to Earth's research facilities, and official recognition as a hero of the human republic. Hero? Zara laughed. I was just trying to save my research data. You saved a lot more than that, Marcus said seriously. You showed the galaxy that different species could work together to solve problems that none of them could solve alone. That's worth celebrating. Through the viewport, the colony ship had completed its approach and was beginning to discharge its passengers onto the surface of New Harmony. Zara watched as humans, Aquarians, crystallines, and other species began to emerge together, ready to build a new kind of civilization. What's next for us? She asked. Marcus pulled up a star chart on his data pad, showing their planned route for the next research expedition. Vex has identified 17 more worlds that could benefit from multi-species terraforming. We have government backing, unlimited research funding, and the best ship in the fleet. And each other, Zara added quietly. Their relationship had evolved far beyond professional partnership, though they were still figuring out exactly what that meant. Romance between species was complicated enough without adding the pressures of groundbreaking scientific work and constant travel. And each other, Marcus agreed, his voice warm with affection. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching as the first multi-species colony in galactic history began to take shape on the world below. The atmospheric processors hummed quietly in the background, creating and maintaining the complex environmental conditions that made such cooperation possible. Marcus, Zara said eventually, yeah? Thank you. For coming to get me on the research station, for risking everything to help expose the truth, for believing that my work was worth saving. Thank you, he replied. For showing me that the impossible is just another engineering problem waiting to be solved. The colony ship's atmospheric reading beacon activated, sending a signal that would reach every major world in known space. The message was simple but revolutionary. Successful multi-species colonization achieved, atmospheric stability confirmed, all species thriving. It was a message that would change the galaxy forever, proving that cooperation was not just possible but profitable. Worlds that had been considered uninhabitable would be open to settlement. Species that had been in competition for resources would find new ways to work together. And at the center of it all was the simple truth that Zara had discovered. In the depths of Titan's toxic atmosphere, sometimes the greatest breakthroughs come not from competing against each other, but from learning to breathe the same air. The Wanderer was scheduled to depart in 3 days, heading for their next research destination. But for now, Zara was content to stand beside Marcus and watch the future being born on the world below. She could breathe again, and this time, she wasn't alone.